Hey, everybody, this is Sean Cease at the Authentic Sales Leaders Live podcast for Thematic AI, and I have Carl Fiera with me today, and we're going to try to do our best to pronounce his last name, but I'm going to call him Carl. How you sell is how you win, Ferrara.
Ferrer. I thought you said you were
For,
going to go the Portuguese way, man. I thought you were going to take a stab at it with the R's, the roll the R's, R's sound like H's, the whole thing.
I was going to try, but I got nervous.
You got nervous. It's
It's like a
fine.
it's like a cold call. I get nervous before I make cold calls, and then I screw up.
Sean, be
But
honest. Do you ever hope that someone won't answer the call? Would you ever do you? I mean, you're like the king of prospecting, right? Or the professor of prospect. You've made, I mean, probably millions of cold calls in your career. Do you still ever get the jitters like before you start, a time block?
so I'm going to say it for everyone out there who's ever done it that I am as guilty of anyone as not for not being prepared when somebody answers the phone. I have from time to time literally hung up on people when they answered the phone because I was not prepared. And that's even that's even late in my career, right? Like sometimes you're cruising along, everything's great, but for whatever reason you get distracted and you're not as prepared as you should be, and then somebody answers the phone and click, you hang up, and I don't know. I'm just going to be vulnerable and transparent and say I'm as guilty as anyone for doing that.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for sharing. So,
Have you ever done that? Have you ever done that? Or could I say you haven't made enough cold calls if you haven't hung up on someone because you were surprised they answered the phone.
I did that. I remember that happened a couple times at HubSpot. I don't cold call now as much as I used to in my role at Refine. It's not really like a major lever that we pull for pipeline, but yeah, at HubSpot definitely get some cold feed, and then yeah, you're on LinkedIn or something. If you've been dialing for a while and like haven't gotten a response, it like lulls you to sleep, so it like really like jars you if when somebody answers. And I've definitely been guilty of being like yeah, at click, because I was like, that's embarrassing. So I'll
Yeah.
call them with another, maybe I'll call them for my cell next time so they don't think that it was the same number. It's a different person.
And then probably the most egregious error of them all is to say, let me call him back real quick and admit that I was the one who called. I've done that. It not trying to literally double tap or use it as a tactic. I think they call it double tapping, calling
Yep.
someone and hanging up and calling back.
Yep.
But if I did that and got spooked, I would call people back and say, hey, you received a call just a second ago. That was me. I might white lie it a little bit and say, we had a bad connection and I lost you. So as far as authenticity goes, it's still a little shady, but
That's gray. That's
yeah,
gray area. See, I
it's a
wouldn't
little,
do that. What I would do is be like, cool, they answered the phone. And I would like be like, all right, they're going to answer the phone. So I'd like prepare and like look at their website and do a little research. And then I would just call them for my mobile so they get a totally different number that came through because I was dialing through like HubSpot's like mechanism, right? And
yeah.
so I would do that and they wouldn't even know, right? So I would just like carry on like I never called them before. So I think my approach is maybe a little like I don't have to white lie or anything. I don't have to say anything, right? I can just kind of just keep going, right?
Yeah. Well, and I most certainly wouldn't advocate for it. I just think if you sit on a bridge making cold calls with, the lightning kind of machine gun technology like Orem or Connect and Sell, all these things that dial at, 1,000 numbers at a time trying to get you conversations that at that volume when you're doing that kind of work and you're having 30, 40 conversations a day, all sorts of crazy stuff
Yeah.
happens. I mean, there's just endless number of stories. It's not a matter of, oh, I only talked to two people. It's more like the stories become, you won't believe what this person said to me or what I got away with or what I was able to do just as a you know the experience of having a bunch of phone calls during one day. All sorts of strange things happen, but you can't really have that conversation with everybody because a lot of people are struggling to actually have a volume of conversations that makes it worthwhile. I
Yep.
want to ask you a question about hashtag really quick here. The sales fam hashtag sales fam. You open up all of your posts with that. Is that something that you started, or that you jumped on with other people? Is that a group or is that a personal thing you started?
It's not a group. It's actually like sort of a personal branding thing. It's completely accidental. I don't want to claim that I was the first person to ever use it. I don't know. I guess I could go to LinkedIn and go to the hashtag and see if it was ever used. But I've been using it religiously for, I mean, gosh, like since you and I met, Sean, you and I met back in like, I don't know what, 2020 or something, like when like everybody started to really take LinkedIn more seriously. Maybe you were on it before then. That's when I started taking it more seriously, when I got brought on at HubSpot. So I just started to use it and then never stopped using it. And it's funny because people like actually ask my permission now to use that hashtag in their posts. I don't know why, but they'll actually like send me messages and be like, hey, I love the Sales Fam hashtag. I know it's yours. Can I use it in my post? And I'm like, sure. So it's somehow trademarked to me. Maybe I should take that like legally more seriously. But kind of accidental, and I think it kind of became my thing. Sort of like how you sell is why you win. I stumbled upon that mantra, if you want to call it that. Same thing 3 years ago. And it has been my headline ever since because people started to associate me with it. And I was like, I'm not going to change it. I've wanted to change it numerous times to other things, but I'm like, this is a good like 6 words that kind of encompasses how I think. I'm not a copywriter, but somehow I stumbled upon like really good 6 words that like clearly articulate a concept that is important to me and I think important to sales. So I've just like kept just these 2 things that I stumbled upon, and they've sort of become a brand element, I guess, which is cool and has nothing to do with my genius or intellect. It's completely accidental.
Well, I think it goes well to your authenticity. I know the reason why I asked is when, I hop onto LinkedIn, whether it's on my phone or on my desktop, and I think that you're someone that I follow by the bell, that I've clicked on your bell. So when you do post, it
Yeah.
shows up at the top of my feed. And when I see hashtag Sales Fam, the first thing I think is, okay, this is probably worth at least taking a look at. So I think you covered the branding thing, but there's some authenticity there because I think you're sharing from the front lines these days. What you're
Yeah.
seeing and what's happening, and so. I was reading that just a little bit of background that you were the first, like you said, we met, you were at HubSpot. I was thinking that it was before 2020, that was like before COVID, but either way, it's got to be the last, 3 to 5 years or something like
Somewhere
this.
in there. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Because I know I talked to you while you were, aggressively working your role at
Ministry.
HubSpot.
Yeah. And maybe we met during Ministry Brands days. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't know. It feels like a lifetime ago, even though it was only like 3 to 4 years ago. But
Yeah. So you made a transition from SaaS to agency work, and I noticed part of your LinkedIn, you mentioned that you were the first sales
yeah,
hire at Refine Labs, and I was just wondering, who did you take over for?
Chris Walker, the one and only. So Chris brought me on. I remember we started talking, oh gosh, almost 2 years ago now. He was pinging me on LinkedIn. He sent me a DM. I remember one day, it was like August or something like that. It would have been 2021. And he was like, hey, I like your brand. And, I'm looking to transition the company away from or out of founder-led sales. And, I like that you have a brand. I like how you think. You sell to marketers, like you have a lot of the ingredients, right? And so he kind of positioned a conversation like that. I had been following Chris for a little bit because I was using his content to educate my prospects at HubSpot, right? To make position myself as a thought leader and an SME, and I wanted to stay up to date. And Chris was the leader at the time. Still is, but at that time, definitely like kind of the sharp voice online that was paving the way for a new direction when it came to marketing and demand gen. So I learned a lot from him. And so it was flattering when he reached out. We went back and forth. I don't know if I've ever shared this publicly, but I remember I rejected his first offer. Wasn't enough. I beat him up on price, you could say, a little bit. And then he came back and we chatted again a couple months later, and that was like November, December. And he made a compelling offer, and I jumped. And so, yeah, took over sales from Chris. There was a little bit of an overlap period where I sort of co-sold with him. And yeah, the rest is history.
So that's a transition from SaaS, because we know that HubSpot's a CRM.
Yep.
Probably you could say it's a couple of different things, like it's a sales engagement tool, CRM.
Yeah, marketing automation.
Yeah, all these things. So from black and white, fundamental SaaS to an agency model. Because just real quick, Refine Labs is a I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'd say a marketing agency or demand creation agency. You've got the you want to share the 50,000 foot.
Yeah, we're a demand gen and research firm, right? And that's a fancy way to say that we do a few different things, but we bring three things to the table for our companies, right? Strategy, like how do we want to fundamentally change how marketing teams think about, measure, and execute marketing. And those are the three things that we help with and kind of align with our services pillars, right? Strategy, execution, right? You bring a demand team, kind of think of like a fractional demand gen team. And then there's a creative element as well, where we have a full service creative studio. We specialize. How are we different from like a marketing agency? I would say that we are kind of in that category, is we specialize in demand creation, the creation of demand. So that's, how do we put the right message, in the right channel in front of the right people when they're not already in market? So if you think about like the 1 to 3% of your market that is currently looking for a solution like yours, that's demand capture, right? Google SEO, like SDR outbound, you could say, is like kind of a demand capture function. It's like, how do we make sure that we're talking to kind of this small cohort of people that are already looking for us? That a lot of agencies are great at that. That's not that difficult to do, right? What's difficult to do is to take somebody that is not in market and push them into market, right? And that takes a different message, a different point of view, a more compelling message. And that's what we specialize in and help. Primarily tech, I would say B2B, kind of mid-market-ish companies. If you're over 5-10 million in revenue, you're a good fit to start to focus on demand creation. If you're that kind of those numbers, there's probably still enough demand to capture to where you don't need necessarily Refine Labs yet, or a demand creation strategy yet. So
you still spend a lot of your time. I noticed on LinkedIn you spend a pretty good amount of your time kind of communicating with people in the sales world. Sales tactics, sales.
Yep.
I think of it as strategy, tactics, and coaching. And you spend some time on LinkedIn sharing different ideas and things like that. And recently, you spoke out about, or made some posts about, literally, saying that business acumen is probably the most important skill set to sharpen. And I know that was, I think, more directed directly at being a great salesperson, or probably being useful for your targets. And I was just wondering, do you have like a 1, 2, 3 on business acumen, or any kind of framework, or anything that you think about that people should be focusing on and learning more about, so that they are more useful to their prospects? Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, keep me concise here, Sean.
Sure.
But I think I'll start with the first thing, is why I believe, if there's anyone listening that's like on the fence, like, business acumen is cool, like, let me give you 30 seconds on why I think business acumen is the most valuable skill, and it actually trumps most of the tactics that are kind of floated on LinkedIn, right? You get a lot of great content on LinkedIn, but a lot of it's very, very tactical, right? Subject lines and cold call openers and this negotiation strategy and these discovery questions. And underneath it all, I feel like a lot of those things are really a Band-Aid or a replacement for just like business acumen. To be summed up in layman's terms, is knowing what you're talking about when it comes to the subject matter that you are selling, or the person that you're talking to, right? Said differently, Sean, do I know something that my buyer doesn't? Right at like the very end of it, like at the very, very bottom, if you really dig down, why does somebody spend time with a salesperson? Why does somebody buy something like Humantic, right? Or buy a service like Refine Labs? Underneath it all, there has to exist some piece of valuable information that you possess that they do not. There is like, that's just a basis for like any kind of transaction. You have something I want. And in most cases in our industry, it's knowledge, right? Humantic may be the tech that provides knowledge. An agency or a professional services company has the knowledge, right? That they then bring through frameworks and processes or execution, right? So that's what I think business acumen is. Again, to summarize it, do I know something that you don't? If the answer is no, then you don't have the necessary business acumen to have a business level conversation with your buyers, and you are going to struggle, which means you're probably going to resort to marginally increasing your performance by way of tactics. Well, if I change my subject line from this to this, maybe I'll get a 0.05% increase in reply rates. And then maybe this will generate pipeline sometime in the future, right? In my funnel. So that's why I believe business acumen is so important. Conversely, if you don't have a lot of the tactics, I've watched SMEs sell at Refine Labs that knew everything there is to know about demand gen and couldn't sell and could still close deals. Why? Because they could just trust someone across the finish line, right? It's very unpolished sales process, no next steps, no good negotiation, like breaking all of the rules, but they just know what they're talking about cold. So the buyer buys because they're like, I want more of this person. I would pay a consulting fee just to talk to this person in the sales process, right? That is business acumen. To me. And the bar, the very high bar, very difficult bar in which I think all salespeople and marketers, anybody on the go-to-market side of the business, right? Customer success, same bar for you, right? Marketing, of course, the same bar for you. You have to communicate to these people when they're still strangers. And sales, right? So it's all these folks need to take business acumen more seriously. My 3-part framework is this. Well, I'll stop there. You have any thoughts? Is that any additional, anything you want me to kind of plumb into there?
Yeah, don't stop at the 3-part framework. Let's hear that.
3-part framework. So a lot of folks that go to like pursue business acumen do it incorrectly. They typically ask questions that are kind of like not deep enough. Like, oh, what keeps you up at night, Sean? Or what are you worried about? And like, that's not how you develop business acumen. So I think business acumen falls into 3 buckets. One, it's like, do you know what the role of the person is? Like, what is their day-to-day? Sean, it's got to be deeper than, well, I don't know, this is a director or a VP of marketing, so they do marketing stuff all day and they run ads for the company. It's like, no, do you understand who they talk to, who their collaborators are internally, how they interface with sales, how they report up to the board or up to whoever is above them? That is critical, right? Do you understand how communication happens in this organization? What is this VP of marketing accountable for? And what do they put in a deck to their CEO or to their CMO when they talk to them about performance or initiatives or priorities once a month, right? That's a much deeper understanding of the role than just, well, yeah, marketers, like, they are trying to save money and create efficiencies and drive pipeline, right? So deep understanding of the role. Then there's a deep understanding of how that company operates. So you can think of like concentric circles here, the role, and then how the company functions. Okay, so there's the company and how it functions. And without burning up too much time, the final concentric circle that you should deeply understand, probably more than your buyer, because this is the part that's also difficult for them to grasp, is broader market trends and industry trends. Okay, so role as the center of the concentric circles here, then company, how the company functions, wins, how they compete, etc., make money, how their pricing works. Are they sales led? Are they PLG, right? Like their go-to-market, like there's a lot of this stuff you can just kind of see, on their website and in their web presence. And then broader, which is the big opportunity, which is really challenging to learn, is trends. That's where blind spots happen for your buyers. And so that's where there's the biggest opportunity for information disparity. And so if you know trends risks that are coming to this industry, how competitors are doing, what they're doing, what levers their competitors are pulling to win, to gain market share, et cetera. That's where you can start to bring a lot of, and that's, again, look at Refine Labs. That's how we've won a significant amount of kind of the market's hearts and revenue and wallet, is because we talk a lot about trends and benchmarks and what's changing in the industry and in the world, that then ladders down to the company and impacts the company potentially negatively, and then also impacts the role negatively, right? And so that's kind of the holistic view by 3-part framework: role, company, industry. If you can nail understanding deeply those 3 things, it's going to be very difficult to beat you in competitive situations, which is sales.
You know, when it comes to putting a quality deal in the pipeline, do you have some qualifying criteria that follows that framework? In other words, trying to keep your pipeline clean and with velocity in it. Do you use those items for qualifying? Do you have kind of a scoring or a sheet or something that you use to make sure that you have high quality deals in your pipeline?
That's a good question. I don't want to let you down. I don't know that I use that framework specifically to qualify. I feel like I do have a fairly unique perspective on qualification. I think a lot of the qualifying that happens today is informational, right? I don't want to crap on BANT or MEDDIC or any of these qualification frameworks. They're great. Where I think they fall down, they're not great. Okay, let me just say that. They're whatever. They can be a Band-Aid, right? Where I think they fall down is they seek to gather information. I don't believe that gathering information is enough to qualify a deal. I believe you need to gather commitments from your buyers. Okay. So let me give you an example, Sean. In BANT or in MEDDIC, there are both components to them that gather some kind of a price, right? Or a budget. Let's say
budget. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so if I gathered from you, Sean, your budget, hey, Sean, what is your your budget this year for agency spend or whatever? You will give me a number. That has nothing to do with your commitment to invest that budget in solving this problem, right? I have a budget for a lot of things, right? In my house, like I have budget for lots of stuff, right? It doesn't mean I'm buying any of it, right? I have a budget for nice cashmere pullovers. I'm wearing a free one that I got, right, from Chili Piper. So it's like, just because you have XYZ piece of information doesn't mean you have a commitment to buy or spend that budget. Same thing for timeline, same thing for authority, same thing for need. Everyone has needs, right? It doesn't mean that I could have a need and articulate that to a salesperson and they're like, oh, great, this is qualified. When I look at it qualifying a deal, I'm not looking for a need informationally. I'm looking for a commitment to solve that need. So 2 commitments that I'm looking for in an initial intro call is commitment to invest. And this breaks down into 2 categories, time and money. I don't care if you have a budget. Are you committed to investing money eventually in solving XYZ problem? I don't need to know what that amount is. I don't care. I'm a salesperson. I'll do the work to make sure that we get paid. I just want to know that you're committed to investing. Okay. The second commitment that is required for me and my team to qualify a deal is a commitment to build consensus. Sean, if you can get a commitment to spend time and money, even if it's not defined how much time or how much money, and if you can get a commitment from whoever came inbound or whoever you booked a meeting with outbound to loop in the right people at the right time, doesn't mean on the very next call. I don't care. I'm patient. Okay. I don't need this to happen in two calls. If you can gain those 2 commitments, you will close that opportunity or those opportunities at a much higher than average, and you will be very difficult again to beat. And you will not gain those commitments a lot of the time, which is amazing. So you can kill that deal and move on and not move it to the next stage and waste all your time working with somebody who hits all the BANT check marks, but has no commitment to do anything. Has no commitment to change, right?
Yep. I've actually noticed, throughout my whole entire career that, like you said, when it comes to doing things tactically, whether it's subject lines or an opener or this or that, it always seems like people are way further down the sales process than they should be in most cases. And what I mean by that is not developing like what you're saying, some level of trust with somebody that you're actually interested in their success, or finding something that's a problem, a big enough problem that's worth solving.
Right.
Worth solving meaning that I would pay money to actually have it solved for me, and people tend to skip over those steps. And one of the things that I added a while ago to my discovery calls was to deliberately ask somebody, what their top three, initiatives are, and not necessarily in that language, but more, a lot more casually, like, the top three, what are the top three things you guys are working on right now? Or, and then put time frames on it. Like by the end of, the summer, what does the fall look like for you guys heading into the end of the year? What will have changed between now and then, or what different solutions would you have put in place? Again, just trying to get people to talk more about what they're working on or
Yep.
what's on their mind. Maybe even to unpack how somebody thinks,
Yep.
and things like that. So when you go back and look at a deal, do you have any criteria that you look at historically to decide whether or not this deal would fit into, um, the solutions that you provide? Do you do any historical analysis of, say, closed won, closed lost deals to see if you can surface any patterns? Do you go back that far?
Oh yeah, we do an enormous amount. I do. Cassidy, my CRO, he'll probably yell at me, but because he's like, I do most of it. No, so we do it together. I don't know what the time split is, but yes, we take closed loss, closed won analysis very seriously, and I'd say we look at those opportunities and those conversations through two different lenses. There's a qualitative lens, which might involve calling them back and interviewing them, or trying to get some kind of survey, like hearing from the buyer that either bought from us or didn't. And then there's the quantitative aspect too, right? Like, well, how much were they spending? What was their ARR? How big was the company? Like kind of some of the firmographic stuff, right? How big was the team? Who was on their team? Because sometimes there's a lot of overlap between what Refine Labs does and what they already staffed to do. So it can be difficult to make a case because the senior leadership is like, well, I'm paying $5 million for the headcount on this team, but now you want to hire Refine Labs. Like, what are all these people doing? Right. I thought they were doing this stuff. So I think a lot of those things, like firmographically or quantitatively, we look at as well. So it's a combination of both of those things. And I feel like we do a pretty good job and have a pretty good sense at this point. Who wins and who doesn't, or who we win and who we lose, even though that's changed, it's shifted a bit, this year. And we've gotten a little bit more focused due to what we sort of uncovered in kind of recent analysis.
Yeah, I went through, I shared this with you a while ago. We've got a few more minutes left here. I was going to share this with you. I had shared this with you. It's something that I built with Humantic AI. So this is just kind of a little shameless plug and pivot here. It's a buying committee. And, for the folks that are following Humantic AI, we use personality insights from LinkedIn to figure out who would be the best person to approach in an organization and how to approach them. I was wondering, what I did was I went through and I just went to LinkedIn and looked at, I went to Refine Labs and I found you and then Chris and then most of the C-suite, and pretty much put 9 different of what looked like sales leaders, marketing leaders, and so on into the Humantic AI dashboard. And then I used that to analyze the buying committee to get some insights on you guys.
Nice.
And I shared this with you, and I know that you might have passed it around a little bit. I was wondering if you got any feedback from the team here. I'm going to scroll down to what the buying committee does is it analyzes everybody in the group, that would be part of the decision-making team, puts them into a little quadrant of how they behave in a buying situation. And I was just wondering if you got some feedback from your team about what they thought about, being put in these different categories, or their thoughts on their personality insights for approaching them. Did you get any feedback from anybody?
Yeah, we got a lot of good feedback. I mean, everybody was obviously trying to see like how accurate, right, it was. I mean, I'm sure you get that a lot. Like everyone's trying to figure out if they were profiled correctly.
Yeah.
Haig is rightfully a skeptic. He's our finance guy.
Yeah.
So he's definitely not necessarily agreeable and is skeptical of all things. But if you can win him, you've got the keys to the kingdom there.
Yeah.
So yeah, overall, yeah, really good feedback. I think the neutral feedback that we got, I don't know if we have time to get into this, was like we weren't quite sure what does a team necessarily, so you have to give me your sales pitch, but what do I do with this? Right. I think that was kind of the open question. Like, this is cool. Now what though? Like, how is this implemented? I guess was sort of the open question for my team. So I thought I'd share the positive, overwhelmingly accurate. And I think the not negative feedback, but just like the open question, right, was like, cool. Well, now what? Like, what does this look like implemented in a process? Was I think the open question from the team.
Yeah. So
We're
there's
talking to a lot of marketers. So
yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, well, and I think that what happens is once you get used to Humantic and what it can do for marketers, it becomes, the sky's the limit, or your imagination is really the limit. Uh, from here, what we do with the buying committees in general, these give you all the do's and don'ts for somebody who's actually prospecting. Actually, it tells you how to modify your behavior to adapt it to someone else's behavior, so you can communicate with them in their natural style. The other thing that we're doing with the buying committees is for our newest clients, or even for a proof of concept, we're actually taking all their historical closed won, closed lost deals and putting it into Humantic so that we can surface the insights around who's actually buying from you, to say that, hey, Carl tends to be able to sell to these different personality types really well. So you end up with two options or two different paths there. You could say, okay, let's align Carl with deals that match his personality type, and or let's actually get Carl some training on disc personality prospecting and so on, so that he can modify his behavior to be able to create a deal that shapes up more like a deal that tends to buy from us.
Yeah.
So using the insights in here to be able to, communicate with the friendly, perhaps to get information, with a friendly, to get information on the champions. Recently, in a deal that I was working on, where we were onboarding, 50 people at one time in 50-person blocks, pretty big group of Zoom people with different layers of leadership in there. And honestly, we didn't do a great job on the first one. We should have actually had same level people in the groups, because it seems that, when you're lower level, if you've only been with the company for 1 month or 2 months, you might not ask the questions you need to ask, because a VP or somebody else is there. It's just
right.
a bad setting. So I was able to use a buying committee. Let's go ahead and stop sharing this right now. See if I can stop that. I was able to use the buying committee to go back and find a friendly who I established a relationship with. And I used kind of the language that you were saying, like for the neutral or the friendlies. I actually went to them and said, hey, you've been super kind through this whole process. And I want to ask you a question that you may not be able to answer, because I may be stepping over the line. But do you mind if I ask you? And if I'm stepping over the line, you can just tell me that you can't say anything. And I just asked him flat out, what went wrong there? That meeting we just had went horribly wrong, and there's something that I can't see. And they said, you made the cardinal mistake. You mixed up C-levels with the low-level people. But they didn't object to me asking the question because of the way that I approached them. Yeah, the way that I used my skills to actually. And then I took that information to the C-suite and said, you know what? I think that I really stepped in doo-doo on this one. Can I share with you my thoughts? And the C-suite was like, you nailed it. Let's get this thing reorganized. You've got a half hour with everybody to get this thing back on track. And so I used my disc, personality prospecting skills and the insights from Humantic to kind of shape and make my way around the deal. And that's the short answer to how you would use that kind of tactically, to shape your deals. The other way is a more strategic way, where we actually take the data that you send over historically and put it through our AI engine and say, hey, here's who you're winning with. So deals looking forward, let's run them through and see where they shape up. And if you don't have the people in the different areas, what can we do to communicate with people inside that org to get the people where we need them to be, so that we create, we shape a deal that we can actually close, using personality insights and
Yep.
behavioral science and things like this. Yeah.
Love it.
I promised you that we would stop at the bottom of the hour there, but or bottom of the half hour there, but we went 5 minutes over. So
Oh, good. It's been fun.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's it. We're gonna wrap it up right there, and I'm gonna bother you about this a little bit because I would like to take some of your historical one loss data and do an analysis for you, just so you could see how things shape up, and maybe look at a couple of deals in the future and see if we can help you move the needle with a couple of things.
I'd be open to that.
Yeah. The last part would be with the Humantix stuff. Again, a shameless plug here is the enrichment of the information in the database, right? So anyone who's running emails to existing clients, cold emails, so on, we put the personality types in the database, so people end up writing 4 different emails, one for each different personality types, and we see the open rates, the reply rates, the click-through rates go up significantly, like from 10% to 22% to 30%. So that helps too. All right, Carl.
Thanks for having me, Sean. It was fun, man.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir.